Welcome, welcome. Dr. Stephen Hobbs here from the Wealth Movement. And I'm shooting the Wellther series and continuing. This is number 4 of 5 with Chris Thomson. And Chris has been sharing insights about the inner cosmos. And today, what we're going to do is explore energy and consciousness as part of this inner cosmos story. I'm going to, though, link it back to number 3.5 because there is an element of insight, Chris, that you were hinting at and providing examples around movement and resonance. And so I'd just like to use that as a bridge and then can move into this energy and consciousness conversation. So can you just briefly just remind us about this movement and in some ways the non-movement that goes with it as well?
Well, yeah. One way of doing that is to say that one of the fundamental qualities of everything, doesn't matter what the thing is, Steve. It could be a galaxy, it could be, I don't know, a turtle, it could be a tree, anything you want to name, is movement. So even the things that appear to be still are full of movement, okay? So let's say a book on your desk or an automobile parked in the driveway. Both of them appear to be lacking in movement, all right? And yet they are both part of the planet's movement as the planet turns round once every 24 hours. They're both part of other celestial movements. So they're moving in an external sense, a part of bigger movements. But they're also moving inside themselves because they're made up of atoms and particles and waves, of which the essence is movement. All right? So all I'm saying is even those things that don't appear to be moving are moving. Everything in this universe is in a constant state of movement. So you might say that movement is one of the fundamental qualities. You could say that, okay? And another fundamental quality, which I think is less recognized, is order. Everything is ordered. So even those things that appear to be chaotic or disordered eventually turn out to be ordered, okay? So we've often been in situations where we don't understand something, it appears to be disordered. Let's say you arrive in a strange town for the first time. You've been driving all day, you're driving in France, you arrive in this strange place. You don't understand the street layout, you get a bit stressed, everything feels disordered, okay? But you spend a couple of days there, you work out the street layout, you get to know things, and you realize that after all, it's ordered. It's just you didn't see that order when you first arrived, okay?
Right.
And that's typical. So typically, if we don't understand something, we make the mistake of assuming it's inherently incomprehensible. Just because we don't understand it, we assume the thing itself is not understandable, okay? And yet that apparent disorder is more a reflection of us.
Yeah.
It's not a reflection of the thing itself. So I'm going to stick my neck out and say one other fundamental quality of the universe is order. You might want to ask me what I mean by order.
Chris, what do you mean by order?
That's a very good question. I mean, it's a question, I had to think about it myself, you know, when I first began thinking about this many years ago. The dictionaries didn't help very much. They didn't really help, okay? But they would say things like a state of being understandable. They would say that kind of thing. So look up any dictionary, look up order, and you'll find it a bit unsatisfying. And eventually I had to work it out for myself. The order is anything that makes sense to us. It might make sense to us now, immediately, or it might make sense to us in the future, okay? So order is something that makes sense now or in the future. So all those many things that seem disordered now, I believe will make sense to us in the future. So just to recap on that, two fundamental qualities of the cosmos are movement, which I mentioned earlier, and order.
And I think you used a phrase yesterday. Yes, it was yesterday when we were doing our connection for 3 of 5. You used the concept of movement and natural. Movement is that something that's natural. So I'm thinking, if you dive into the order, this movement, order, naturalness, there is a connection there. And I think that that would lean into something around resonance as well. So there's something that is unfolding around the use of those words. Would you want to comment a little bit more about the connection of them?
I think the connection is the word energy.
Okay.
Why do I say that? Well, I've said already that I think two of the fundamental qualities of the universe, of everything, are order and movement, all right? Yet at the same time, we're told by scientists and by others that the universe consists entirely of energy. So everything is a form of energy. Matter, heat, light, radiation, they're all forms of energy. The universe consists entirely of energy, okay? So I asked myself, if that's true, what's the connection with these other two fundamental qualities that seem common to everything, order and movement? And I've started thinking of energy as order and movement, connected together. You know how people talk about space and time as two things that are connected together? They even put a hyphen between the words, space-time, okay? People talk about space-time as a single concept. I think the same is true of order and movement. So I think energy is order and movement. And I think that's very significant. It'll take a long time to unpack that, Steve. We don't have time today, but I think it's significant because it brings us back to resonance, okay? I said you can define order as that which we can make sense of.
Yeah.
So when we make sense of something, there's a kind of relationship, isn't there? You know, we look at something and say, oh yeah, that makes sense. Oh, I understand that. Okay. Oh, now I understand what's going on. Okay. There's something inside us that's changed, that somehow resonates with the thing we're looking at, that makes sense. Okay. So the idea of making sense itself only makes sense if there can be a resonance between us and whatever it is we're looking at. That's what I think. It's this resonance between us and whatever it is out there that makes it possible for us to make sense of things. If there wasn't a resonance, we couldn't make sense because there'd be nothing to resonate with.
Now, I know that you wrote a blog and that speaks about some of this as well, and that in your blogs you're writing around this and adding more different angles to this concept of inner cosmos, which is great, and the link will be with this video, so you'll be able to find it, dear listeners. The other angle that we have talked about before around this notion of energy, and we linked it to consciousness and cosmos, consciousness. You've been sharing a little bit around this idea of being who you are, and then being human and being natural and being with Gaia and all that. So there must be some sense of what we call nestedness, or Russian doll inside a Russian doll. That's one of the best ways I can explain nestedness. So I know there's probably a couple of parts to that, but can you just connect energy and consciousness and then weave it back in, or I'll sort of stimulate through some questions here, the connection to nestedness. So let's just unpack that angle of the story. So let's go with energy and consciousness right now.
Okay, I'll try and do it in easy stages. Energy is that which we perceive, okay? Energy is perceptible. We can perceive it, okay? We can make sense of it. So it's that which is perceptible. Consciousness is the act of perceiving. Okay, we, the perceivers, relate to energy, which is out there, okay? And I think consciousness is more or less the same as perceiving, okay? There are outer perceptions, which is normal. We're conscious of the world around us immediately and far away. And I think our inner perceptions, you know, our thoughts, the stuff that goes on inside us, I would think are reflections of our outer perceptions. So take our dreams, for example. All of our dreams have their basis in what goes on outside us, okay? In things we have perceived somehow outside us. But just to make the point again, so if consciousness is the act of perceiving, and energy is that which can be perceived, you can see the huge connection between the two, okay? There's no point in being perceptible if there's no one there to perceive you. And there's no point having consciousness if there's nothing to be conscious of. So the relationship between energy and consciousness is crucial and central. I would even go so far as to say it's the main relationship we have with the cosmos. This relationship between energy and consciousness.
So the energy, not only that exists that we perceive, but the energy that we'll put out ourselves when we're perceiving something that we want to move with or move forward with. There would be that kind of connection, because the word energy, and let me just play with the word a little bit, it's N, erg, and Y. And if this adds, and then you can let me know, is the EN is like a prefix that suggests the move into or on. And erg is like a unit of work, and the why is, let's turn that into the question why. So you're moving into something with a unit of work, but there's got to be a reason why you're doing it if you're putting energy into something, right? So when we talk about personal energy, the inner cosmos, when we perceive something as being there and it's worth putting our movement into, would that be a fair connection? I know I'm playing with the word, Chris, but would that be a fair, another way to look at what you're sharing about energy and consciousness?
You've raised a problem. The problem is that the word energy means more than one thing, okay?
Yeah.
So people use the word energy to mean several things. And those several things are very different from each other. So one has to decide which meaning you're using when you say it, okay? So a typical meaning is the definition that scientists use. So energy is the capacity to do work, all right? Fair enough, fair enough. And out of that, you get petroleum and gas, nuclear energy, all of that stuff, okay? The stuff that does work. So that's one meaning. Another meaning is, a bit like the feeling that one gets off a person, okay? You're talking about a general feeling that one gets when you meet someone. You talk about their energy. So the term is used very loosely to describe that person. That's another meaning. A third meaning is the meaning that I'm referring to, when physicists also say the universe is made of energy and nothing else, okay? And when they say that, they don't say exactly what they mean. They just say it's all energy. And then they talk about forms of energy like matter and heat and light and radiation, radio waves, you name it, okay? Gamma rays, cosmic rays. These are all forms of energy. So you've raised a problem, Steve, and the problem is that the word means several very different things, which is fine, as long as we decide beforehand which of the meanings we're going to use. The same is true, for example, of the word spirit. If you look up the word spirit in a big dictionary, there are at least 8 meanings, 8 very different meanings for the word spirit, okay? So he's got a fighting spirit, okay? A spirit level, spirit as in vodka and whiskey, all right? Spirit as in spiritual, which is fine. It's okay to have different meanings for the same word. That's fairly common. But I think it's very important to decide beforehand which meaning you've chosen before you start talking about it.
And I certainly agree with that, because one of the things I do, even in my own consulting practice, is define the terms and concepts and get agreement on the terms and concepts you're going to be playing with. And so that makes total sense. So the other element that I would like to explore is this nestedness, and the implications of that. Can you just explore that with us to get a sense that Russian doll inside a Russian doll, and how that would apply to the inner cosmos?
Yeah, again, as simply as possible, because time is not long, time is quite short. If you imagine the cosmos, the universe, in terms of levels, so the biggest level is the universe itself, all right? And then what you have is local groups of galaxies. And within those local groups, you have galactic clusters, okay? And within those clusters, you have the galaxies themselves, and so on. And as you go down, within the galaxies, you have collections of stars, which are not galaxies, but are collections of stars. Then you have the stars themselves. Within that, you have planets circulating around the stars, okay? Beyond that, you have moons. Within the planets, and I'm kind of going on, stop me if you want to, you have other layers, so to speak, okay? So one layer on our planet is nature, with a capital N, which you could define as the whole of life. So all living things is nature, okay? And within nature, you know, this nesting you're talking about, within nature, you have various forms of life, including vertebrates, okay? Within vertebrates, you have mammals. Within mammals, you have primates. And according to scientists, we're a primate, okay? So within the primates, you have humanity. We're part of humanity. And so on. Let's imagine Russian dolls, okay? So we're now at a very small Russian doll, somewhere in the middle. And within humanity, you've got individuals like you and me. And it keeps on going. This holarchy, the word is a holarchy. H-O-L-A-R-C-H-Y, okay? And each of these levels is called a holon, H-O-L-O-N, H-O-L-O-N. It keeps going down. So within a human being, you have organs. Within the organs, you have systems. Within the systems, you have molecules. Within the molecules, you have atoms, and so on, okay? Now, the biggest possible thing, the biggest holon, by definition, is the universe. There cannot be more than one universe. Why? because there cannot be more than one everything. If the universe equals everything, then that's it, okay? And by definition, again, the smallest thing is the quantum. That's what it means. It means there's nothing smaller, okay? You can't get smaller than that. So you can imagine this huge hierarchy with the very big thing at the top, the universe, and the tiniest thing at the bottom, and we are somewhere in the middle. And just to round this one off, we in the middle are part of all the bigger things. So we, you and me, are part of humanity. Humanity is part of nature. Nature is part of this planet. This planet is part of the solar system, and so on, okay? And that's the key, that this idea of being part of something is the key. Because if you're part of something, Steve, you somehow share in its character, in its quality, okay? In its nature. So it's pretty obvious we share in the nature of humanity. You know, we look human. You know, we have the characteristics of humans. But we also have the characteristics of the next level above, which is nature. So like all other living things, you know, we are conceived, we are born, we mature, we reproduce, we die. We have the characteristics of nature, all right? And it goes on. Because nature is part of this planet, it has the characteristics of this planet. In other words, all living things on this planet, including you and me, are somehow shaped by this planet, by its mean temperature, by its gravitational field, by the atmosphere we can breathe, okay? So this is why we look the way we do. It's because we're products of this particular planet. You know, if we had lived on another planet somewhere else, we'd be human beings, but we'd look very different because we'd reflect the qualities of that planet. Is this all making sense?
Making sense to me. I understand where we're going. I've always liked holons and holarchy that goes with that, because one of the phrases that I heard, and I always liked it, is sort of like, well, it's a turtle on a turtle on a turtle, but it's a turtle under a turtle underneath a turtle. And I just went, well, that's a lot of turtles. And knowing and perceiving, having some consciousness of knowing where that is that we can conceive, yes, the higher, but we can't necessarily go off the planet in some ways, okay, physically, right, without having a lot of other apparatus, and we're using apparatus to go down, right? It's kind of a fun way in which to be conscious of who you are in what's unfolding in front of you. I've always enjoyed it. So, but I'm just curious from your perspective, what is the implications of knowing this?
Well, that is the big question, I think. It's one thing to understand it intellectually, okay?
Yeah.
Which I think people can do. People can think about this and they can get it intellectually, which is fine. It's quite a different thing, Steve, to really embody it emotionally and live it, okay? So the way I think about it is in terms of members of a club. So, you know, are we full members of nature, you know, the world of nature? Or are we associate members? Or are we non-members? Are we just here for the ride? Because if we're full members, then we abide by the rules of the club. Whatever the rules of nature turn out to be, we live by those rules. Okay? And you can go on, you know, up the hierarchy. You can imagine rules for each level. You know, I haven't worked out these rules. That would take a year and a day and more. But I can imagine that there are rules for each level, okay? And if you're a member of, let's say, Planet Earth Club, the Gaia Club, a full member, you would really live as if you were a member. You would look after the club. You would bring on other members. You would participate fully to make sure the club was functioning well and growing and developing, okay? So I think the metaphor, the idea of being members of a club is a very useful one because you can draw some very useful analogies.
That's true, and I guess the what did you call it? The non-member, the associate member, and the full member. There's almost a nestedness inside of that. There's a consciousness that goes with it. There's an energy that goes with that in terms of your selection of participation. So therefore, your movement. There's a neat way to look at this inner cosmos and this outer cosmos. So I certainly appreciate that. So if we are a member of being human and being with nature, what might be some things that we could do to get ourselves just sort of wrapped around maybe some basic rules? I know I'm sure you're probably going to unpack it over the next years to come. But what would be a couple of things that we could do that gets us to be more with this movement, more in the full membership of the club with nature? What would you suggest?
Well, let's forget the cosmos and the galaxies and all those higher levels just now, okay? Because that's, in a way, big stuff far away, all right? And let's just focus on the stuff that's near us.
Yeah.
So as I said earlier, the next hole on up from us as individuals is the human race, okay? And the next one above that is nature, the whole of nature. And you can coin some very useful phrases, Steve, to guide you. So if you wanted to be a full member of humanity, the human club, you would learn to become fully human. You would live with the idea, the concept inside you of what it means to be fully human, okay? Because that would make you a full member of the human club. Likewise, with the next hole on up, which is nature, you would learn to be natural. The word nature, the word natural, okay? And that's it. You know, what would it mean, literally, to be natural? What does that mean, being natural? You know, and I wonder how many of us ever even think about it. It's why, as you know, I'm very interested in Taoism, because certainly, as far as I'm concerned, you know, one of the kind of essentials of being a Taoist is being a full member of nature, you know, being fully natural, and learning to be part of nature, learning to follow, learning to understand and follow the rules of nature. And I think a lot of Taoism is about that. So just to recap, I mean, two very easy phrases to remember: being fully human and being natural. You know, and within those two phrases, there's a wealth of richness.
And tomorrow, the next time we meet, I call it tomorrow, next time we meet, the being fully human will connect with something around, I think it's intelligent simplicity, I think is your phrase. There would be maybe exploring a little bit through intelligent simplicity based on even the book that you wrote, but to be able to take a look at that. Would that be fair, or we can take a look at those terms?
I think, now that I think about it, okay, this is a new thought for me right now. I think intelligent simplicity is a wonderful connecting link between being fully human and being natural. I think intelligent simplicity is a beautiful little phrase that connects the two.
And then I'm thinking, yes, you use the phrasing as sort of rules that the Taoism brings into play. So there would be an element of the how-to would probably come out of learning a little bit about the Taoism. So maybe we could explore that just a little bit more in the call tomorrow and bring it together with intelligence. Would that be fair? Sort of bringing those concepts together and getting it as a way for someone to really get into movement and understand what we're talking about. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I mean, just to repeat the phrases, Steve. Being natural, okay? Being, not doing natural. This is not about doing natural, which is very different and probably impossible. Likewise, doing human is probably impossible. Okay? But being human, I think, is the objective here, and being natural. So it's just to maybe inject a word of caution here, okay? When you say how do we do this? How do we do that? People are looking for things to do, the verb to do, okay? I think the stronger approach lies in the verb to be, about being human and being natural. We can discuss that tomorrow.
Okay. And it's certainly a good point, because people do phrase it around do. I sometimes talk about to do, to get to be, because you have to understand some of the action to get the movement to be there. It's the, how do you hold on to that being from that doing? It's like our English language is so much fun. And I'm sure that there's other languages that sort of play with. I'm sorry?
Yeah. You know, you're reminding me of that dialogue between Socrates and Aristotle and Frank Sinatra. Remember the dialogue they had?
No,
if you don't know it, I mean, Socrates says to be is to do. And Aristotle said, no. To do is to be. And Sinatra said, to do.
Yeah. And there's some truth to it, right? I know it's kind of a funny story, but there's some truth to it. Is I use words like unpack and explore and discover, because to get to somewhere, to be natural, to be fully human, there's some things you've got to do, even if it's to read a book about what that might mean, to be able to understand that you are to be there. And our conversations, it's such a, wow, it's it's so much fun to unpack it, to explore it, discover it, that what we're talking about. So for the sort of, we're winding down for this kind of conversation, and we've explored this notion of movement and order. So the inner cosmos, movement and order, would be like the title of this presentation, connecting it to energy and consciousness. And we did a little bit of insight around nestedness, the Russian doll story. If you were to sum up and give us a way to internalize this, to come to an understanding, what would be, even if it's a bit of a repeat, because it's worth it, because they're so rich here, how would you summarize it for us to sort of walk us out with a smile on our face out of this?
Well, the word that comes to mind is reveal.
Oh, can you say that again?
Yeah, reveal.
Okay.
Okay. Because I think we already, all of us, have all this stuff inside us. Okay.
Okay.
So even the stuff that seems unknown to us, like what does it mean to be a Taoist today, for example? Okay. Or it doesn't matter what it is. I think all of us already have this stuff inside us, okay? In potential form. We might not know we do, we might not see it. We may go through the whole of our lives not knowing it, Steve. The whole of our lives, okay? And I imagine that's true of many people. But I believe because of this inner cosmos that I think we all have, that the trick, the secret in all of this is to find ways to unpeel and reveal what's already inside us. In other words, it's the old-fashioned idea of education, where people believed that children and adults already had the stuff inside them, and that the purpose of education was just to find ways to bring it out into the world. It's what the word education means, doesn't it? To lead out. So I think for me the main thing to bear in mind is all of this stuff's already inside people. They might not see it, but it's there, and really all they have to do is to find a way to bring it out.
To express it, to get into that movement, to be natural. All right.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And being that I'm very interested in educating and learning, these are sparking some thoughts in me as well. So that's great. So I thank you for that. And I would certainly encourage those that are listening and viewing this video is add your comments, because that might lead us into other aspects of this story that we can unpack and discover, explore in the Wellther series. So with that, Chris, thank you for today. And we'll catch up to our Inner Cosmos 4 of 5 in the next little while. And we'll see how we unpack. I think we're going to look at something like intelligent simplicity and maybe even the Taoist storyline. So I see you're nodding your head, so I see there's some agreement there, so that's great. So with that, I'm going to wish everyone the best, and take care, and thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Steve.